In professional sports, a franchise player is an athlete who is not simply the best player on their team, but one that the team can build their franchise around for the foreseeable future.
Welcome into Franchise Players here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, tobacco-road-sports-radio.com, your home for online Triad sports coverage. I'm your host, Desmond Johnson. You can catch us every Thursday on the Tobacco Road YouTube channel. Please come rate, subscribe, and follow at youtube.com/@Tobacco Road Sports Radio. You can hear everything from franchise players, WWE coverage, NASCAR coverage, Panthers, Hornets, you name it, everything's there if you're in the North Carolina area. If you're in the Triad, you can hear this on terrestrial radio on Friday afternoons during our TGI Friday lineup over on WWBG 1470 AM in Greensboro at 5 p.m. every Friday. And in Winston, Salem, you can hear it on WTOB 980 AM, 96.7 FM at 6 p.m. on Friday evenings. Loaded show today. David Glenn stopping by on his bi-weekly joint through franchise players. We'll hit him up with the sports buffet. And the four-man rushes, Kevin Avery will give us the four-man rushes top 4 Carolina Panther prospects for pick number 33 in the April draft, which will be happening here in a little bit over a week. But kicking us off here, very busy man, John Dell from the Winston-Salem Journal. And you're doing a little stuff for the News and Record too, aren't you, John?
Yeah, we're the News and Record and the Winston-Salem Journal are owned by the same company, Lee Enterprises. So we whatever goes in one usually goes in the other. So we try to hit on all the Triad with the News and Record and the Winston-Salem Journal.
Yeah, I was kind of there. I was there before. A lot of people know in my previous life, I was the digital sales manager over at the Journal. And towards the end, I was actually doing it for the News and Record too. And you can kind of saw both of them kind of starting to not merge together, because you can't really merge them together, but starting to collaborate a lot more between the two before Lee Enterprises took over operations out there. A couple of things I wanted to hit on with you, because I know there's a couple of things specific that you cover for the Journal. One of those things is Bowman Gray Racing. That's coming up here very shortly. And of course, we have weekly articles from Cody Hecox on sportscarolinamonthly.com. But the big news this year was that NASCAR has basically took over the management of Bowman Gray, if I'm not mistaken. Can you kind of walk us through the story here of how that came to be, how Bowman Gray is now back in the hands of NASCAR, and will it make a big difference for Bowman Gray fans coming in on Saturday nights to watch the races now that NASCAR is going to be kind of running things out in Southside?
Well, Bowman Gray Racing Stadium, the racing is one of the longest in NASCAR sanctioned. NASCAR has always sanctioned the series, but the Hawkins family has always ran the day-to-day operations. I don't think the fans are going to notice much change as long as the prices stay the same. There's still free parking. It's $12 to get in. You can bring in your own food. As long as that stuff stays the same, I don't think there's going to be much difference. Greg Garrison, who's kind of the general manager, he's going to stay on for most of this year to kind of help with the transition. Austin Shoemate is the new the guy that's running the day-to-day. He's going to learn from Gray and kind of see how it all goes. He's actually doesn't work for NASCAR, but NASCAR has contracted him to run Bowman Gray. I'm amazed every Saturday night how many people show up to Bowman Gray Racing. Yeah. They sit in the same spot. They cheer for the same drivers. They throw their middle fingers at some of the other drivers. I mean, you know how it is out there, and there'll be 14, 15,000 out there Saturday night. It's supposed to be great weather. The opener is Saturday, so the Hayes Jewelers 200 with the modifieds will be the featured race. But it's year 76, and it's something that's one of the most popular East Coast short tracks in the country.
It's been around. I think it's the longest, isn't it? The longest short track that's been in operation.
Well, and the stadium was built in 1937, 38, and it wasn't long after that where they had some ideas of running dirt track racing around there, and then it evolved to asphalt, obviously. But it's I think it is the longest running short track that's still in operation.
It's amazing to me. I had a business meeting over at Winston-Salem State, and it was at Bowman Gray, their athletic departments in the Bowman Gray building or whatever. And I was over there, and we were looking over, they have the area where you can kind of oversee the track, like when you're on like the second or third floor or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there looking at it. I'm just like, that's a small track. You see the articles and stuff. There's like 40 cars like going around this track.
Yeah, there's not much room on that track that they get through those races. It's amazing, but they've made it work and the fans love it. So
as Bowman Gray starting Saturday. So, it's right back on top of us and it's here for the summer. I know thousands of people love it here in the Triad. Don't think there's gonna be much of a difference with NASCAR taking over. I'm curious to see if like the extracurricular is still going to be in play, like the fights and stuff like that. Cause that's kind of what built Bowman Gray, right?
Right. That's kind of going to be the question if these drivers go after each other on the track or in the pits, what are going to be the consequences? Is NASCAR going to clamp down? It's going to be a work in progress. I think, obviously the kind of from the fan perspective, are they going to be a little bit more transparent if someone gets suspended? They didn't have to tell us anything before. Maybe that's NASCAR true. Will be a little more transparent. If I don't ask over there why a certain driver is in there, they don't, that they won't know. They don't tell me. So maybe though that in that respect, they'll be a little more transparent if they are suspending drivers or if they get in fights. I mean, there's fights over there. That's kind
of the thing. Yeah.
It's what people kind of come and see, and hopefully some good racing involved too. But it's, I think the drama will be about the same this first year, and we'll see where that goes. And I think the most drama is in the sportsman division. That's just my take.
Yeah, you're right. It does seem to be in there with like Amber Lynn and folks like that in that division.
It's interesting. Amber's only going to race, according to her schedule, she's only going to race like 4 or 5 times out there this year. She's not doing a full schedule. So that may change. Yeah. That may change the dynamic. She wants to just come for the big races. She'll be there for the opening night, but I talked to her at one of the practices, and she's just going to kind of pick and choose this year.
And she deserves that at this point. She's one of the more popular names at the track. Friend of the program here. We've had her on Tobacco Road multiple times on the pit stop and other programs, as well as some of the other racers that'll be out there. So, and these guys, they live in the community. Like literally, like when I drive through Walkertown, I'm probably passing 5 drivers' houses with garages and stuff. You kind of know the ones. They'll have a big garage in the back, and they're out there in the evenings working on the cars and stuff. So, Bowman Gray back in action this Saturday. John Dell, sports writer for the Winston-Salem Journal and the Greensboro News and Record, on with us here on Franchise Players this week. The Masters was last week, and I got a chance to see some of the highlights of Tiger Woods. And of course, Scotty Scheffler won pretty much in dominant fashion on Sunday, kind of pulled away from the crowd. But I wanted to focus more on the Tiger Woods aspect of this. He did make the cut, which I believe he broke a record or something like that in terms of number of cuts made. But just look like a shell of himself, really. And really, I think the question now, I kind of landed on this like a year ago, but it feels like now everybody's kind of coming with me. Are we watching the end of Tiger Woods? Like, should he even attempt to play majors anymore? Do you think it'll chip away at his? It almost feels like Washington Wizards Michael Jordan, but even then, Jordan was still dropping 20 points a game and playing 82 games. Like it wasn't peak Jordan, but it was still good Jordan. I don't know if this is good Tiger. Like, as a Tiger Woods fan, what are your thoughts on this? Because this is 20 plus years of Tiger Woods.
Right. Well, I'm a big fan of Tiger Woods. I would carry him to each hole if they wanted me to, because I want to see him play. I kind of equate it back to in the Arnold Palmer days, when Arnold Palmer was finally not playing on the Champions Tour. Lee Trevino one time said, well, fans would pay to see Arnold Palmer get the clubs out of his trunk.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same with Tiger. They'd love just seeing Tiger. I mean, people were watching him, following him going to the putting green there at the Masters. I was there Sunday morning. Him and Charlie were working on the putting green, and they all walked. He walked, him and Charlie walked back to underneath the tree, and everyone was saying, oh, Tiger, hey, Tigers. And I said to Charlie, well, Charlie, how are you doing? And he kind of so it's just, I just think he may have a chance to win again. I don't know if he has 72 holes in him. That's the thing. It's ironic that the first 2 rounds were terrible. Thursday, Friday, the conditions were windy, and he played great. He made the cut. And then Saturday and Sunday, when the conditions were a little more tame, and he struggled. So I just think he ran out of gas, but he made that 24 straight cut at the Masters, which is a tournament record now. He's got that. And then, like you said, he struggled on the weekend, just couldn't find his game. But people watched. They were all over that course watching Tiger Woods. So I don't think he's done, but his days of contending with these guys over 72 holes in a major, those days might be over.
I almost look at it like, does he even need another major? Like, I know he was trying to catch Jack Nicklaus for the most majors won, but it's almost like a Michael Jordan, Bill Russell type of situation where it's like, yeah, Russell's got more rings, but Jordan was the greatest. Like, I mean, do you consider Tiger Woods the greatest golfer of all time, or is he still got a little bit to go?
No, he's the greatest of all time, but Tiger's stubborn. He's 48 years old and he's stubborn. He thinks he can still do it, which is fine. I mean, what else is he going to do? I mean, how many times, most people retire to play golf, but he's been playing golf his whole life. So I don't know if he's going to play on the Champions Tour when he turns 50. That remains to be seen if he's going to go out there and play, because, you get carts and all that. And he would be a big draw because, he's got 82 wins in his career. The interesting thing about Tiger is, the Wyndham Championship is in August in our area. And to me, that's an easy course to walk because the holes are close together.
Yeah,
so
it is.
He's played at the Wyndham before. I've written about this. Maybe he comes back and plays in the Wyndham in August because he's not going to be making a playoff run. He's not going to be in the playoffs. Maybe he comes and tries to break Sam Snead's record of 82 wins on Sam Snead's course where he won 8 times or whatever. So
okay.
I've thrown that at people, and we'll see if that happens. And another thing is the U.S. Open. He hasn't qualified for the U.S. Open. The USGA has to give him a special exemption. So Pinehurst in June is not a done deal, but the USGA is going to give him a special exemption to play. And that's another course that the holes aren't far apart, and he can walk that a little bit easier than most. So maybe he contends at the U.S. Open in Pinehurst. 25 years ago, he was right there, with Phil Mickelson battling out at, down at Pinehurst number 2. Obviously, Payne Stewart won, but Tiger, I believe, was 3rd in that tournament. So, we'll see. But I hope that he still can play because, quite honestly, that's when I watch is when Tiger's playing.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not a huge golf fan, but the times I can remember getting sucked into golf tournaments over the past 20 years, Tiger Woods had something to do with it, and he was wearing a red shirt on a Sunday. Like that, it kind of just brings you into the drama. And in my lifetime, I've never seen as a dominant player in a sport as Tiger Woods, including Jordan. There was a stretch where Tiger was just like, you knew he was going to win the tournament. It was just a matter of how much, like how many strokes he's going to win it by.
His red shirt he had on Sunday, I kind of made a joke. It wasn't like the striking red. It was the more the red of, hey, I just want to get the heck out of here.
Not the subdued.
Not playing well. Yeah, the subdued red.
You can follow John on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle nowadays, John?
I don't even know. It's on Twitter somewhere. WS Journal. Dell at WS Journal.
Just type in John Dell. It'll pop up there
somewhere. Yeah.
He's got his finger in a little bit everything in terms of sports here in the Triad. You can read his work at journalnow.com and at greensboro.com for the News and Record and for the Winston-Salem Journal. John Dell here with us on Franchise Players. Appreciate you stopping by, man.
Thanks. Have a good week.
Coming up, David Glenn will be in with the Sports Buffet. We'll talk a little bit about Zion Williamson's injury. We'll talk about the best college basketball team he has covered during his career and a lot more. You're here on Franchise Players on TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com.
Franchise players are often referred to as the face of the franchise.
Welcome back into Franchise Players here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. Shout out to John Dell from the Winston-Salem Journal and Greensboro News and Record who just stopped by to give us a little Bowman Gray preview. Bowman Gray Racing starting Saturday night here in Winston-Salem. So the 14 to 19,000 of you that are going to be in there, packed in there watching that race. Have fun, be civil, enjoy yourselves when you're out there this Saturday. Joining us now in his bi-weekly joint through Franchise Players, it's Mr. David Glenn from the North Carolina Sports Network. You can follow their work at ncsportsnetwork.com and on their YouTube channel. What's up, DG? How you doing, man?
I am doing great, Des. Good to be with you as always.
So I'd sent you a little bit of a rundown earlier this morning, so you'd be actually prepared. Usually I throw you into the deep end. You have no idea what we're going to talk about. But I sent over a couple of the hot spots I wanted to hit this morning with you, and I thought of one after I'd sent it out, and it's the transfer portal. If you follow DG on Twitter, they are probably the best in the state in keeping up with the transfer portal almost to the minute in terms of overall the schools in the area that are losing kids. How many kids did you say are in the transfer portal right now? You told me off camera.
Yeah, the number is closing in on 1,700 as we speak. That's just Division I men's basketball. And remember, there's 350 plus programs. So if you do that math real quick, you're talking about an average of 5 departing players per school just in the transfer portal. That doesn't count guys who are just graduating seniors, guys who are leaving for the NBA. An average of almost 5 outgoing transfers per school. And depending on the school, some have been hit really hard, some not so much.
Some in our area. I noticed in the beginning, I felt like Wake was losing a lot. Lately, it feels like Duke has had somebody in there every 3 days that have left over the past couple of weeks since the season ended. Out of the ACC Big Four, NC State, UNC, Duke, Wake Forest, which of those 4 do you think have been the most affected by kids going out into the transfer portal?
No doubt you'd put them in 2 different categories. State and Carolina would be in the category where so far, and this stuff can change by the minute, as you said, so far the Tar Heels and the Wolfpack have had minimal damage on outgoing transfers. Would Hubert Davis like to have Seth Trimble back as a wonderful defender and an extra guard and an amazing athlete and an unselfish player? Of course. Would Kevin Keats like to have a guy like Cam Woods back, who was actually an all-conference player at North Carolina A&T in your backyard prior to transferring to the Wolfpack? Yeah. He's in the portal. Yeah, but those are manageable departures, right? Every school is used to bench players transferring out. The massive difference is that at Wake and Duke, starting players are leaving. And Des, you and I have known each other for a long time. If we made a list of starting Duke players who departed via the transfer portal, and I mean in the history of the program, I've been covering it since the 1980s. Yeah. I'm not sure if we could get past the 5 fingers on a single hand. I mean, all time. And
I
just
think
this
of one
year,
off the top of my head, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
I remember a guy like Billy McCaffrey way back was on a Duke national championship team in 1991, and he transferred out to Vanderbilt and was not part of that national title back-to-back team in 92. So that's a rare example of a prominent player leaving Duke.
That's 30 years ago.
Right. So we have 4-year starter Jeremy Roach entering the portal and exploring the NBA draft. And we have 2-year starter, the power forward Mark Mitchell, entering the portal. So that's 2 just this year. And it is a sign of the times, obviously, but similarly, at Wake Forest, the starting point guard, Boopy Miller, is back in the portal. He just arrived last year via the portal, and now he's leaving via the portal. And the starting power forward, Andrew Carr, another guy, he came from Delaware 2 years ago. He's a really good veteran power forward for the Deacs. His name is in the portal now. So plus a bunch of backups at both Duke and Wake are in the portal. 7 is the total number last I saw for Wake on the outbound. That's just the portal. 5 at Duke. But again, it's not that big a deal when you lose a backup player. That's not a bad transfer. The young man probably finds more playing time somewhere else, and then you have an extra scholarship to use on either an incoming transfer or an incoming high school player. But it's anytime you lose a key member of your rotation to the transfer portal, it's a concern. It's just not unique anymore in college basketball.
Yeah, with the case of Seth Trimble at Carolina, I kind of understand him leaving. It's just there's just not enough minutes. And with N. Jackson coming in, the 5-star freshman, Elliot Cadeau is going to be the starting point guard. I don't think R.J. Davis is going to be back for his 5th year. I haven't seen anything one way or the other. Yeah, there's no word. So
no word on Harrison Ingram either.
Yeah, now I had seen that Ingram is on the fence and really is 50-50 on whether he's going to stay or go. I think he may be back, although many people have said this might be the weakest draft since the 2000 draft or whatever. So in the past 20-something years. So RJ maybe should go in this draft and possibly go first round. You mentioned those numbers for Wake. That's like half the roster.
Like, you only have 13 scholarship players,
yes,
right? So like, if 7 of them are leaving, that is truly more, slightly more percentage-wise.
Now it's different between the two of them because with Wake, those are starters that are leaving. Well, really in both instances, those starters are leaving, but they've been there a couple of years, and I don't see them getting pushed out by incoming players. At Duke, it's more, okay, you've got a 6-member freshman class coming in. They're highly rated. 2 of the top 3 kids in the entire class are coming in. They're going to start. So it's almost like I was joking with Duke fans during the tournament that I think Duke lost a lot of its mojo after Duke on social media, the athletic department made a big deal about the class coming in. And I'm like, the season's still going on.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think these kids feel that are out here playing? And they get on Twitter and they see their athletic department basically pushing them out. Like, that's kind of what it felt like to me when I watched it. And their play kind of reflected it after they had put that out there. They just didn't seem as interested as they had been before. And something had happened, but we never figured out what. And to me, it was always they're pushing the next class. And now you're seeing Mitchell leaving. Roach had a 5th year where he could have stayed. And he's going to leave. Or either way, he's either going to try the pros or he's not coming back to Duke. He made it pretty clear that I'm done here. I don't think it's Shire pushing them out like I felt Hubert did last year with some of those guys. He got them out the way to clear the roster spots. I think they just saw the writing on the wall. It's Duke, and the next group's coming in. And used to be them. They used to be that group that came in. So I did want to ask this, though, while we're still on the transfer portal, because Shire hasn't really used the portal since he took over the program. Do you think that's because of the academics at Duke? Because I'm thinking it's hard to transfer credits into Duke, but then I'm seeing Wake Forest actually use the portal very successfully, and I would put them on the same level of academic as Duke. So do you think it's the academic issue, or do you think it's Shire just choosing to go a different route building a team?
I think it's more a philosophical issue, and I think John Shire is reevaluating it as we speak, because I know there's at least 3 major college transfers where the Blue Devils are talking to them as possible incoming transfers. Now, keep in mind, Duke has had incoming transfers, but almost always like the complementary player. Ryan Young came from Northwestern essentially to be the backup center for a couple years, other backup players. But Duke is one of the only schools, kind of like Clemson in football, is one of the only schools that has really hesitated to dive in, even though this transfer, the creation of the transfer portal is only about 5 or 6 years old. And the creation of immediate eligibility for transfers is only a couple of years old.
Yeah.
So these schools have to make philosophical decisions about how much you're going to tap that pipeline. I believe John Shire right now, as we speak, is changing his ways in that regard out of necessity, because college basketball is older, Des, and 40%. There were years as recently as 5 years ago where the 15-man All-ACC basketball team had 1 major college transfer, 1 out of 15. In the last 2 years, it's been 6 out of 15.
Yeah.
That means 40% of the best players in your league are coming from the transfer portal. So you better reevaluate your philosophy about that. And I promise you, Duke's going to sign at least 1, maybe multiple incoming transfers, and they won't all be role players this time. As you mentioned, Steve Forbes is like the transfer whisperer. Like that guy knows what he's doing in the transfer portal. And that's why Duke and Wake are very similar academic institutions. I don't think there is every school is unique, but I don't think it's purely an academic issue at Duke, although I'm sure the hurdles are trickier at Duke than they are at other schools.
And it's crazy now that I sit here and think about it. The past 3 Final Fours, an ACC team that's been greatly beneficial to the transfer portal has made it to the Final Four. NC State pretty much built their team in the transfer portal.
Top 7. Every man in the 7-man rotation at NC State is a major college transfer. That's the first ACC champion in 71 years that the entire rotation consisted of transfers. And I believe, it's harder to research this, I believe the Wolfpack is the first Final Four team ever where the top 7 rotation is all transfers.
That's nuts.
It's hard to go back to the 1930s, but I'm pretty sure that is an accurate statement, which again, that Miami team, man, loaded with transfers.
I was going to say Miami the year before. And then the year before that, Carolina and Brady Manick against Duke. Well, Duke didn't really have the transfer players, but Manick was a starter with Carolina. Right. So
It's not the only way to do it, right? You know, Purdue and UConn were in the Final Four, and they have some transfers, but not an overflowing number of transfers. So there's different roads to the top of the mountain. But you better – John Shire, in his visit to the David Glenn Show not long ago, almost got offended when I asked him this question. And I have a great relationship with John dating back to when he was a player at Duke. So it's not like he doesn't like me. But he got defensive and he said, well, DG, would you turn down any of those 6 prep All-Americans I just signed? And we didn't have time to get into the debate, really. But my comeback would have been, Coach, I'm not suggesting you don't sign high school All-Americans. Yeah. I'm suggesting you better start supplementing them with major college transfers. And I say that as a guy who freely admits John Shire has forgotten more about basketball than I will ever know. However, these big picture themes are things that I write about. And frankly, my research is probably better than John Shire's research on that narrow topic.
The proof is out there. I mean,
yes.
I think personally the Carolina model is going to be the model that a lot of schools adapt going forward, where it's a little bit of everything, where you hit the transfer portal hard in the beginning, you fill in the gaps, you might find a starter or 2 there to get you the experience you want. You bring in 2 or 3 5-star high school kids that don't necessarily have to start right off the bat. Elliot Cadeau didn't start at the beginning of the season. He earned the spot. And by the time he got in there, everything took off, as opposed to just throwing him out there in November in a tournament in New York and hoping they just congeal and just work together like an AAU team. It's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see going forward which one works out. I got a little bit of time left here on the end of the segment. We're going to talk a little bit about Zion, but we're going to skip all that because I want to get to the main question I wanted to ask you today. I rewatched the documentary on HBO. I had to find it on YouTube last night because HBO took it off. Of my favorite team of all time. And I wanted to, before I reveal mine, I wanted to get yours, maybe not your favorite team, but who was the best college basketball team that you've covered in your extensive career covering college basketball?
There are 2 come to mind from our backyard. One when I was a very young journalist and one as an older guy. One's from Duke and one's from Carolina. If you forced me to pick one out of the 2, I would probably go with the 2009 North Carolina Tar Heels.
Okay.
I mean, you know, the world had started to change by 2009, but even with players more often leaving early for the NBA, that Roy Williams starting lineup was all juniors and seniors. And you had a tough as nail point guard in Ty Lawson. And you had a tough as nails big man in Tyler Hansbrough at 20-plus points per game. And imagine, you had Danny Green, 40-plus from three-point land on one wing, Wayne Ellington, 40-plus from three-point land on the other wing. And then you had Deion Thompson. You had 6'10" Ed Davis coming off the bench as a future NBA lottery pick. So those 09 Heels are way at the top for me. And then way back, the 1992 back-to-back Blue Devils. Bobby Hurley, one of the great point guards in college basketball history. Christian Laettner, one of the great players in college basketball history. Grant Hill, just an all-around amazing person and player. I mean, those guys won it all in 91, repeated in 92. There was a bunch of NBA players on that team, like the 09 Carolina team. Those are the first 2 that come to mind, and they both, man, I wouldn't want to have to beat them. I think Duke lost twice in 92. Carolina lost maybe 4 times in 09. But remember, that Carolina team beat all 6 NCAA tournament opponents by double digits.
Yeah, it was one of the highest until this year.
That does not happen very often.
We just saw UConn go through. I think they set the record this year. This year's UConn national championship team. I agree. And actually, from watching the movie I watched last night, I feel like the 91-92 Duke team doesn't get enough credit for how good they were, which is weird because if you were alive and watched it, they were like the Beatles, literally like when they would show up at places similar to a rock star like band or whatever when they were at the show, especially in 92. By the time it got to 92, Christian Laettner might as well have been Justin Timberlake at that point. Like he was just all over the place.
He was a senior, remember? Like he was on the Olympic team and he was a senior at Duke.
I hated him on the Olympic team because we felt like Shaq should have got that spot. But Christian Laettner was the National Player of the Year. And looking back on, I'm like, I don't know if Shaq would have adapted to carrying everybody's bags and, all the stuff that Laettner getting coffee and stuff like that. But my number one team of all time, and I think we've had this conversation before, it sprung up from the NCAA tournament talk from a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to make sure I was right. So I went back and I went on HBO to look for the documentary, wasn't there, found it on YouTube. is a documentary on the running rebels of UNLV and Jerry Tarkanian, from how they landed Tark all the way to 93 when he had to step down. And be honest, the 1991 UNLV running rebels are the most I'm trying to think of a word to describe them. Like, just
overwhelming.
It felt like grown men playing like middle school kids every week, even if it was number 2 Arkansas, like on a Saturday afternoon on CBS, they're beating them by 35. Like, it just, and you knew it going into it. That's why you were there. You were there to watch the beatdown. And it was just dunks, man. They were just dunking on you like all day. Like, it was just crazy, like how good they were. And they had multiple, I think Anderson Hunt went in the first round. They might have 4 first round picks in the starting lineup. Still hold the record for largest victory in the NCAA tournament, 30 points and 90 over Duke. Duke avenged that the next year in the Final Four. And I always tell folks in that Duke UNLV Final Four game, Duke had to play the perfect game.
Yeah. Like
literally the perfect game. Greg Anthony had to foul out with about 4 minutes to go in the game just for Duke to be able to pull ahead. And then UNLV had to literally mess up the last like 8 seconds of the game. Larry Johnson should have shot 3. He didn't even attempt it. Like, all these things had to still happen just for Duke to have a chance to beat that team. Like, and Duke was a good team. Like that to me, I'm just like, that's 90 was good, but 91 was the one that was like 35-0 or whatever when they got to Duke in the Final Four and was just beating everybody. And to me, they didn't win it all, but to me, that was the most dominant college basketball team I've seen in my life. It just never seen it since. Like, nothing like that. That kind of set the template for me for college basketball going forward. It's like pre-UNLV, post-UNLV, because right after that was Michigan and the Fab Five, and
I get it.
It goes on from there, and then you get the one and dones and everything else. So, just amazing to me. Real quick before I get you out of here, though, the Charlotte Hornets are actually in the middle of a coaching search, and I put a post on Twitter, I think last week after the women's college basketball championship. How would you feel about the Hornets offering Dawn Staley the head coaching position?
I'd be absolutely okay with the conversation. But if I owned the Hornets, I would want to know with Dawn Staley, how would you coach differently because you're making not just 1, but 2 transitions. It's from the women's game to the men's game, and it's from the college game to the pro game.
Right.
So I would need to hear thoughtful answers to those questions to be sure that that's the kind of person. There's no doubt she can coach. I mean, she's been an elite college basketball coach for, I think, 24 years now, dating back to her Temple days. She's a Philadelphia person originally, as I am. So I've been following her career since she was a player. She's an amazing person. She's an obvious winner. She has the respect of everybody I know in the basketball community. But just as if I was inquiring about a men's college basketball coach, I would ask the guy some of those same questions, because we've had a lot of really good men's college basketball coaches. When they tried to make the transition, it did not work out very well.
Yes.
So there are fair questions to be asked. And of course, she would have to answer whether her heart was in such a thing as a trailblazer, which is what she would be. But sure, ask the question. Why not? Right. I mean, invite everybody and pick the best person.
I know the Hornets are interviewing Lindsey Harding, who is coaching the G League right now. So they are interviewing a female. I don't know if Dawn is on their radar or not, but she's right in their backyard. I think it'd be foolish for them not to kick the tires on it at least. But we'll see. The Hornets are in an interesting position, new ownership, new front office, and looks like they're going to probably end up projecting into a top 3 pick in this draft. Although we just led the segment by saying this might be the worst draft in 20 years. So I don't know if that's going to really help them out or not. Follow DG on Twitter /X at David Glenn Show. You can follow their work at ncsportsnetwork.com and go check out their pods over on their YouTube channel under the North Carolina Sports Network. See you in a couple of weeks, DG.
Always good to be with you, Des. Keep up the good work.
Coming up, 4-man rushes. Kevin Avery is going to give us the 4-man rushes best prospects for the pick at number 33 for the Carolina Panthers. The NFL draft coming up here in a little bit over a week. We're right here at it. So we'll talk about that in just a sec. Franchise players here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio.
Franchise players are often referred to as the face of the franchise.
Special shout out to David Glenn, who stopped by to talk a little college basketball and everything else in the sports buffet. He's with us every 2 weeks. Shout out to DG and the North Carolina Sports Network. I told you we had a loaded show today. We'll be back next Friday. Before we get out of here, though, got to touch on some Panther stuff. Believe in Panthers. We'll be back with our draft blowout special next Tuesday live on Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel and the Believe Podcast Networks. Myself, Panthers all-time leading rusher Jonathan Stewart, and Sports Illustrated Panthers beat writer Skylar Callahan. We'll go more in depth in terms of the draft picks. We'll grade the offseason so far from Dan Morgan, the dog in the GM office that's been putting in some moves. I've actually been pretty impressed. And I've got with me Kevin Avery from the Four-Man Rush. What better time of the year to bring on a member of the Four-Man Rush to really go with analysis, draft selection, mock stuff, finding diamonds in the rough. And that's what this Panther front office is going to have to do with the draft picks that they have as we stand today. Now, granted, there's no telling what Dan Morgan's going to do with some of these picks as we go into day 2 and 3 when we really get active. But I wanted to focus on pick 33. SportsCarolinaMonthly.com is running a series right now. Who should the Panthers pick at 33? Wide receiver. That article has been out for a couple of days. You can find that on the website there. The one for inside linebacker, I believe, drops here in a couple of hours. So it gives you, the Panther fan, a chance to kind of get an idea of what might be going on in the war room. Who are the guys that they are looking at? Kev, what's going on for starters? And as we get towards draft weekend, next weekend, actually right around the corner, I wanted to grab you to find out who are you guys, you and Monty and the rest of you guys kind of talking. I know this time of the year you guys are going back and forth on who should they get here, who should they get there. Who are some of the names that have been popping up the most amongst you guys over at the Four-Man Rush? Give me who you feel like is the leader in the clubhouse amongst you guys in terms of who the Panthers should pick at 33.
Hey, well, thanks for inviting me back, Des. It was a pleasure to do franchise players with you. Definitely keep up the good work. Yeah, as far as the Four-Man Rush, I mean, I know a lot of people think we all have similar thoughts. We agree on a lot and we disagree a lot, believe it or not.
Yeah, y'all disagree a lot.
Yeah.
But that's what makes us fun. Yeah.
When you come in a slit, we get unified and give you what you want. But anyway,
Facts.
but as far as the thought, shout out to West Side Money. But anyway, as far as like the players, just like quarterback was the big discussion last year. I see that the energy is still the same for wide receiver. All over the place here. This it's kind of like it. A lot of our opinions depend on two things. Number one, what players are still available by the time we pick it, number 33, and two, what type of offer for number 33 would be good enough to make us possibly consider trading back. But let's just say for this particular scenario, since you said we're focused on the 33rd pick, let's just say that there's a player there that we feel like is worth taking there. Obviously wide receivers, the hot button. Monty's been a big fan of Keon Coleman, out of Florida State. Yeah. And because I think he transferred from like Michigan State, if I remember correctly. But yeah, Keon Coleman seems to be his guy. Will, who runs the Four-Man Rush Twitter page, he's a little bit he tried to be all over, but he's kind of a favorite, Lad McConkey out of Georgia.
I've heard that name popping up a lot lately. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, this guy's like a technician. I mean, if you're talking about getting open quickly on short intermediate routes, this seems to be the guy right here. And then you got the rest of us like myself. I'm a big fan of Xavier Leggett out of South Carolina. A little bit of bias because I am Carolina alumni. Since I did get my degree from there back in the day. But as of course, Daz, I've been a diehard Tar Heel fan all my life. So,
yes, sir.
I rep both Carolinas. But yeah, so that's my pick. Now, Smooth, he's of the mind frame of BPA because he's like, look, we're 2-15. We got so many holes. Like, don't just pigeonhole what may be the 5th, 6th, or 7th best wide receiver when you could get a chance to get a possible top 2 or 3, person at a different position because we just have so many needs, and I can see that logic, behind that, so just kind of amongst the four of us, that's kind of where we're leaning to. But as far as Smooth's pick, if one of the centers she happened to drop the one out of Oregon, JPJ, if he should just happen to be there available, or out of Duke, Barton, if he just happens to be there and available, he wants to secure protection. He puts protection of Bryce Young above everything else, above weapons. And I get it. We already secured 2 massive guards, so getting a top-notch center definitely, would make sense to protect. So that's kind of where the Foreman rush stands at who's available at number 33, each one of us.
You said Devontae Walker from Carolina, right? The wide receiver.
No, I was saying Xavier Leggett at number 33.
South Carolina. I'm sorry.
South Carolina, yeah.
And he's been floating around right there at 33 also. There's a glut of wide receivers, including Devontae Walker, that I don't know if Devontae is a second round pick. He might be maybe late second, early third, but there's a group of them there. I'm a little leery. Keon Coleman from Florida State, he kind of reminds me of Kelvin Benjamin a little bit. So I don't know about the big body guy. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I like the guy from Oregon. I like the kid from LSU.
Troy Franklin from Oregon.
Yeah, I like the guys that are kind of not fast but quick, like shifty. They can kind of create space. Because that was seen to be the big issue last year with our wide receivers. They just couldn't create space out on the open. And I think Bryce will have more time this year than he couldn't possibly have less time than he had last year. He's going to have a wall in front of him at this point. And I think Dave Canales is going to know how to use him effectively, just from using a Geno Smith or a Baker Mayfield, guys that are 6'1", 6'2". He knows how to roll them out, how to design plays for them to get out of harm's way. And for those that don't know, Panther fans, I think Dan Morgan and Dave Canales are having their pre-draft live press conference Thursday at 12:30 p.m. Mm-hmm. So if this is out after that, then you should be able to find it on the Panthers YouTube channel and watch that later on this evening. Kevin Avery with us here from the 4-Man Rush. Give me your grade of the Panthers offseason as a whole, free agency wise, as we get close to draft night, because we left the end of the regular season on Believe in Panthers. All of us were just kind of skeptical about the future going forward. And I made a point in my mind, like, I'm not going to get excited about next year no matter what they do. Like, I'm just not going to set myself up for it.
Right.
And I went to bed last night and I was like, you know what? That's kind of the stance every Panther content creator is taking, where we're not going to get excited about it. We're not going to give them flowers. Like, you need to prove it to us. I think I'm going to lean back the other way. I think I'm going to go more towards, I am excited about this because it does look like they have a plan. I don't think they're tricking us. It looks like the coaching staff generally likes each other, and they actually have worked with each other before, which is refreshing for here. And it feels like the players are re-energized. Plus, something that I didn't really think about until somebody mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. At this point last year, Bryce Young wasn't in the building yet. This is around the time when we had decided we wanted Bryce Young, and we were about to go pick him. This year, he's had a whole offseason to be in the building with the playbook and Dave Canales and these wide receivers to bring it in and everything else, the linemen, and just kind of work on, rapport and energy and just getting synced up with each other that he didn't have last year. Bill Polian's always said the greatest leap for a quarterback in the NFL is from year 1 to year 2 in that offseason, because they actually are there, in that offseason. With all the signings they've had, and shout out to the NFL for swapping this around, because it used to be the draft was first and then free agency opened up, and it's made it team building completely different, because now I feel like you really can go into the draft and do BPA if you did free agency right, and I think the Panthers did. Give me your grade for what Dan Morgan has done with the roster the way you remember it week 17 when we didn't score a point and ended the miserable season, the 2-15 season, to where we are today. And are you allowing yourself to get a little bit more excited than maybe you expected to be in April?
When I answer the first part, as far as my grade, I would give so far a grade. I would give a solid B, not a minus, not a plus, just a solid B here.
It's fair.
Definitely a total difference from the end of the roster, from end of last year to this year to at this point. Obviously, me being a trench guy, I'm going to look at the trenches first. I mean, you think about the signing of guards, Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis. there's I don't know if you knew the stat, but the Panthers had used 15 different players at right guard and left guard last year.
Wow.
By far the most in the NFL. Like, it was literally a revolving door.
That makes sense. Yeah,
had that position. Yeah, so getting Hunt and Lewis there definitely solidifies the guard position for us for the next few years. And then a name that's not getting a lot of mention so far that I like was one of the better signings was offensive tackle picked up from Green Bay, Yosh Nijman. He's a guy that was, they said brought it here to play swing tackle or anything like that. But, I don't know how much Dave Canales may want to go unbalanced or heavy, but this would be a guy that would be that extra lineman that you would bring in, in particularly short yardage, goal line potential situations. Like this guy's a people mover. He removes people out of the way. And he's also an insurance policy, in case anything, God forbid, knock on wood, happens, saying at the tackle position for either Moten, who hasn't missed a start since he's been here.
Yeah.
And of course, with the soon to be third year left tackle Ike Ekwonu. So great insurance there. Other side of the trench, we got Ashawn Robinson that we signed to play. That's a lot of people don't know him, but they did not know when you're running a 30 front, having someone that can play that anywhere between that 3 technique to 5 technique, 4-eye technique, where you line up directly over the tackle, like when you're using a 30 front, having a player that can be disruptive, like he is, his value is not going to be measured by stats. And I think a lot of fans get caught up trying to judge linemen based on how many tackles he have, how many sacks did he have.
He only had 5 sacks last year.
I'm almost annoyed when I just hear the word sacks. I mean, yeah, that's the sexiest stat, but anybody that follows the trenches knows a lot of the stuff that makes play in the trenches effective cannot be measured by simply a stat metric.
Yeah.
How many times did he absorb in double teams? How many times did he knock the guard off that was pulling that allowed the linebacker to come in to make the play? It's things like that linemen do that the typical casual fan don't pick up on and recognize. That's not because it's not in a stat. That's not an official stat for that unless you're into advanced metric stats, which most people are not. But just overall, Des, I'm just really I just really like the moves that was made. You probably noticed with Brant Tillis. My God, this man has been putting on a clinic on accounting 101.
Yes,
all of these caps. I mean, the cap hits are for the most part evenly spread out, maybe a few $1 million here and there. All the guaranteed money is pretty much up front. So if something should happen after a couple years with these players, we can, let them go. One of the moves that a lot of Panther fans thought we was going to do but didn't do was, the $29 million that's going to be the cap hit for right tackle Taylor Moten. A lot of fans thought that might would have gotten structure, but Dan Morgan pretty much is like, no, we want to go ahead and pay our bills up front. This is the new way that we're doing things. So, this player is just owed this money and he showed that he's done it. Then we're just going to go ahead and pay it up front. And I like that type of thing. And I get tired of hearing, just restructure. Like, it's just like at home, pay your bills when your bill due.
Yeah, stop using that payment plan. Stop using that Duke Power payment plan. Just pay it.
Right.
They're going to get their money, whether it's today or 6 weeks from today. They're going to get their money.
They're going to get their money. Right.
Either way. 4-man rush is Kevin Avery joining us here on Franchise Players, getting us propped up for draft coverage next week. Again, Believe in Carolina Panthers and the Believe Podcast Network will be back with a live episode next Tuesday. Myself, Skylar Callahan, and Jonathan Stewart. I'm trying to think. I think we covered pretty much everything I wanted to cover for it. And we're just kind of in this holding pattern right now where it's like, okay, let's get through the draft and then we can really see what this roster is going to be. And then we'll kind of go from there. I think we're going to try to do Believe in Panthers in Charlotte during training camp live, I think. And if I do, I want to extend an invite to you guys to come through. We're talking about it. We talked about doing it in Spartanburg last year, but that didn't work out. But we may do it. We're talking about maybe trying to see if we can do it at Thomas Davis's bar uptown in Charlotte and just do a big show there during training camp week in Charlotte in August. So I'll keep you and Monty posted on all that as it gets put together, and we'll try to make it a big deal. But appreciate you coming through, bro.
Oh yeah, always. And again, just just want to say I'm proud of you, man. Like I remember when you first started, doing the sports media thing, the build up, man, on top of working multiple jobs on top, man. I mean, you I don't know if you got any Jamaican in you, but boy, you did.
People ask me that all the time. I'm just like,
you're a hustler, man. I respect your grind, bro. So
it's just, man, it's just time management, and when you make the decision to work for yourself, again, Duke Power don't care if you pay it today or 6 weeks from now, they're gonna get their money. So once I got comfortable with the idea of I could make that Duke Power payment without having to clock in someplace, then it became to grow. And I honestly, I think people just like the genuineness of it. Like we're just trying to get the sports content that has been shrunken in terms of coverage locally in the past 5 or 6 years. We've had so many great sports writers and reporters and radio stations that have just shrunk, and those people aren't employed anymore. Like they didn't have any place else to go because none of the other stations were hiring either. And I just saw a hole in coverage that I was like, well, nobody's trying to fill it, especially up here. Mm-hmm. And that's basically what we're trying to do, and just trying to keep it growing. But it helps that places like the Four Man Rush, OG Triangle Media out in Raleigh, Joe Ovies and Joe Giglio, Dimitri Ravanos, Lauren Brownlow, all of them out there, David Glenn, who's just on before you with the NC Sports Network. We're almost building a new model of how to report sports in terms of you don't have to go through corporations anymore. You don't have to go through the big newspaper, radio station. If you have a brand, you can kind of build it yourself. The Four Man Rush, you can build it yourself and carve out a niche and get these athletes and coaches to take you serious and understand that you're the next channel to get this content out. So we're just following what everybody else is doing, and we're thankful that all of us have been cooperative to work with each other, because that's what really makes it work, that we're able to cross over and do things together, and it builds everybody's brands, and people begin to look at us as spots to go to get the content that they want. So very fortunate.
Pull everybody up, no crab mentality, everybody, it's enough for everybody.
And me, I go reach for you guys. I go pull from over here. I pull the C3 folks started coming in with me this year. So like I try to go find the best content creators I can and shine a light on them on traditional media like this, on traditional terrestrial radio or whatever, so it can bring them over to where you are on YouTube or wherever it might be going forward. So shout out to you, shout out to Monty, shout out to Cody, shout out to everybody that I've done stuff with over the past year during Panthers stuff. And I'm looking to grow it out even more as we go forward. But that's it for us for Friday, or really the week of ending April the 18th, 2024. Back next week with a new episode. We'll be in the middle of the draft when we come back through. So we'll be able to talk about what happened night one. And we'll be right on top of our picks in the second round. So we'll get into all that and more. For Kevin Avery, for David Glenn, for myself, you've been listening to Franchise Players here on TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com.